When my grandmother passed, she left me the family farm, 18 acres of hard-earned peace and heritage. But the local HOA had other plans. They claimed my land violated their bylaws. Even though we weren't part of their neighborhood, I tried talking. I tried reasoning. They tried trespassing. So I fought back with electric gates, trained guard dogs, and a legal counterstrike that made them wish they'd never stepped foot on my soil. I never wanted trouble. All I wanted was to live my life quietly on the land my grandmother left me. She raised me here, taught me how to care for the soil, how to mend a fence, how to keep goats from chewing through everything in sight. When she passed, the farm came to me. 18 acres of peace and history. Nothing fancy. Just fields, a few barns, a winding dirt road, and a house that creaked in the wind like it was whispering stories from the past. We weren't part of any neighborhood. No gated entrances, no shared sidewalks, no newsletters filled with passive-aggressive complaints about lawn heights. Definitely no HOA. That's why I stayed. That's why I never left. So when I heard tires crunching up my gravel driveway one morning and saw a shiny black SUV pull up, I figured someone was lost. Maybe a city person looking for fresh eggs or honey. That happens sometimes. But then I saw her. She stepped out of the car wearing a beige pantsuit and heels so tall I thought she might sink into the dirt. Blonde hair perfectly sprayed in place. Designer sunglasses. And a clipboard clutched to her chest like it held the secrets of the universe. She didn't look around, didn't wave, just marched right up to me like she owned the place. "You must be the property owner," she said, flashing a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Barbara Langston, president of the Rosewood Hills Homeowners Association." I wiped my hands on my jeans, still holding the feed bucket I'd been carrying for the chickens. Rosewood Hills? That's the neighborhood on the other side of the hill. I'm not part of any HOA. She tilted her head, smile still plastered on her face. "As of last quarter, your land falls under our expanded jurisdiction. We filed annexation paperwork with the city. You should have received a notice in the mail." I blinked. No, I didn't. And even if I had, this farm's been here longer than your subdivision. My grandmother bought this land in the 1950s. We're not part of your community. Her smile sharpened like a knife. "Well, we can discuss the details later. But just so you're aware, you'll be expected to comply with our bylaws going forward." That's when I laughed. Not politely either. It just burst out of me. I thought she was messing with me. Like maybe this was some kind of prank show. She didn't laugh back. She just clicked her pen and started writing something down on her clipboard. "I'll give you a few days to look over the packet," she said, reaching into her leather tote bag and pulling out a thick envelope. "There are some immediate violations that need to be addressed. Unapproved fencing, non-permitted livestock, that kind of thing." I didn't take the envelope. I just stared at her, trying to wrap my head around what she was saying. "This is private land," I said. "You don't have any say here." Barbara sighed, like she felt sorry for me. "You're not the first property owner to resist change. But the sooner you cooperate, the smoother this transition will be." Then she tucked the envelope under her arm, turned on her expensive heels, and walked back to her SUV without another word. The tires kicked up dust as she drove away. I stood there in the middle of my driveway, holding a bucket of chicken feed, heart pounding harder than I cared to admit. That was the day everything changed. And that was the first time I heard her say it. "You'll be expected to comply." At first, I really thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe some mail got mixed up. Maybe Barbara was just trying to throw her weight around, and someone higher up would set it straight. That's what I told myself. Then the letters started showing up. The first one said my tractor was visually disruptive to community aesthetic. I stared at it for a good minute, trying to figure out what that even meant. The tractor was parked beside my barn, like it had been for years. Nobody could even see it unless they were standing right at my fence line. The second notice came 2 days later. This one claimed I had unauthorized fencing, the same wooden fence that had been there since my grandfather hammered it into the ground with his bare hands. It was old, sure, but sturdy, apparently not approved. Then came the third letter. I almost laughed when I read it. Unregistered livestock. They were talking about my goats. My goats. On my land. That's when I stopped laughing. I called the number listed on the letter. Got voicemail. I left a message. No response. I called again. And again. Nothing. So I sent an email. Then another one. Still nothing. Finally, I drove down to the HOA office. Tiny little building tucked between a coffee shop and a dry cleaner. It looked more like a dentist's waiting room than a place where people made decisions that could ruin someone's life. The receptionist didn't even look up when I walked in. Just told me Barbara was unavailable at this time and that I could submit my concerns through the appropriate digital channels. I stood there for a second, stunned. I was being fined thousands of dollars, and no one would even talk to me. Just a bunch of printed letters with vague threats and made-up violations. By the end of the week, the fines had doubled. No explanation. No follow-up. Just a bigger number and a more serious tone. Then things started getting strange. One morning, I went out to the back field to check the irrigation line. That's when I saw the tire tracks. Deep ruts cut through the dirt, right across the edge of my corn rows. Someone had driven onto my property. No reason. No permission. Just straight through. I don't get spooked easy, but something about it made my skin crawl. It wasn't just disrespect. It was a message. A few days later, I went out to feed the goats and noticed the gate to the pen was wide open. One of the smaller ones, Rosie, was missing. We searched everywhere. Woods, creek beds, even asked a few neighbors. Never found her. I didn't sleep well that night. The next morning, I drove into town and bought a heavy-duty electric gate system. Installed it myself over the weekend. Motion-triggered cameras. A keypad entry code. Posted clear signs on the fence. Private property. No trespassing. And just in case it didn't send a strong enough message, I pulled my old shotgun out of storage and started keeping it by the door. I didn't want to fight. But if they were bringing one to me, I wasn't about to sit on my porch and watch everything my family built get taken apart by a bunch of people with clipboards and bad attitudes. They thought they were dealing with some tired farmer too stubborn to change. They were about to find out I was something else entirely. I gave up trying to talk to them. That part of me, the part that believed people would come to their senses, it was gone, burned out like a busted fuse. So I changed my strategy. I got defensive. First, I brought in 2 German shepherds. Big, loyal, smart. They weren't just pets. They were protection. I trained them myself, kept them close, and made sure the word got out that they didn't take kindly to uninvited guests. Then I upgraded the property. Motion-activated floodlights that lit up the driveway like a prison yard. Trail cams nailed to trees along the fence line. Every angle, every corner, every shadow. Covered. I wasn't just watching anymore. I was waiting. That's when the courier showed up. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was trimming low branches by the side pasture when a white van rolled up to the gate. The guy didn't speak much, just handed me an envelope with a polite, "Sign here, please." Then he was gone. I opened it right there by the gate. Official Rosewood Hills letterhead. Thick paper. Cold tone. They called it a final demand. It said I now owed over $19,000 in accumulated fines, penalties, and administrative fees. And if I didn't pay in full within 30 days, the HOA would move forward with escalation, and I quote, up to and including property acquisition under Charter Clause 7B. I stood there, reading it 3 times, as if maybe I had misunderstood. They were threatening to take my land. 18 acres. My home. My family's legacy. And they thought they could just take it because some line on a map got redrawn and some woman with a clipboard decided I was in her way. I didn't get mad right away. First, I walked back to the house, went to the kitchen, and poured myself a drink. Whiskey. Neat. Sat at the table in silence. The dogs rested at my feet like they could sense something had changed. Then I opened the drawer and found the business card my neighbor Hank gave me a few years back. If you ever need a real lawyer, the kind that doesn't blink, call this guy. I picked up the phone. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to fold. I was going to hit back. The night it happened, the air felt wrong. I couldn't explain it exactly. Just this heaviness, like something was watching me from the dark. The dogs were restless too, pacing near the door, ears twitching at sounds I couldn't hear. Around 10, I took a flashlight and walked the perimeter like I'd gotten used to doing. Checked the gate, the shed, the barns. Nothing out of place. Just darkness and occasional rustle of leaves. But then, as I was heading back to the house, I saw something out by the old hay barn. A shadow. It wasn't moving like an animal. It wasn't low to the ground. It was upright, deliberate, slow. I killed my flashlight and stepped behind the oak tree near the fence, watching. The moon gave me just enough light to see her clearly. Clipboard, flashlight, heels. It was Barbara. She was walking the edge of my property like she had every right to be there, like this was part of her weekly routine. Taking photos, scribbling notes. She didn't belong here, not even close. This wasn't some cookie-cutter development. This was farmland, my land. I stepped out of the shadows. You lost? She didn't startle, didn't even turn quickly. She looked over her shoulder and smiled, calm as ever. You know, non-compliance comes with consequences, she said. You could have avoided all this. All what? I snapped. You fine me for my tractor, my fencing, my goats. Now you're trespassing in the middle of the night? That's not enforcement. That's harassment. Barbara took a step closer. Not afraid. Not ashamed. I'm giving you a chance to cooperate. Because if you don't, she paused, eyes locked on mine, you'll be gone before winter. One way or another. She said it like it was a fact. Not a threat. Just destiny. And then she turned and walked off into the night. No fear in her stride. Just certainty. I stood there long after she disappeared. Fists clenched at my sides, my heart thudding in my ears. I didn't sleep. Not that night. The next morning, the first thing I did was check the tractor. I don't know what told me to. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was because she'd been standing so close to it. But the second I lifted the hood, I saw it. The fuel line had been sliced clean through. A razor blade, most likely. Sharp and fast. A perfect cut. That's the kind of thing that doesn't show up right away. You start the engine, get halfway into the field, then it stalls. Or worse, catches fire. I was lucky I hadn't used it the day before. The pit in my stomach dropped deeper. She had done it. I knew it, but knowing isn't proof. Not in court. Not with cops who already shrugged me off the first time I tried to file a report. I called my lawyer, told him everything. He told me to stay calm and gather what I could. So that night, after the sun went down and the dogs had settled by the fireplace, I sat at my desk and opened the trail cam footage. I'd mounted those cameras in the trees for moments exactly like this. Uninvited guests sneaking around where they didn't belong. I pulled up the video from the night before. Fast-forwarded through hours of nothing. Just wind, shadows, a raccoon here and there. Then movement. I paused. There she was. Barbara. Same blazer. Same clipboard. Same flashlight in one hand. Something shiny in the other. She moved through my property like she was doing an audit. Taking pictures. Looking under tarps. Scribbling notes like she was building a case. Then she reached the barn. Paused. Turned, walked over to the tractor. She bent down, right where the fuel line is. I zoomed in. The footage wasn't perfect. It was dark, grainy, but the shape of her arm, the angle, the motion, it was unmistakable. She was cutting something. Then she stood up, tucked something into her bag, and walked off like nothing happened. I sat there, hands frozen on the keyboard, staring at the screen. My breath came slow, controlled, but my chest felt like it was on fire. She had done it, and I had her on camera. That moment changed everything. This wasn't about bylaws anymore. This wasn't about grass length or HOA politics. This was criminal. This was someone trying to sabotage me, scare me, push me off the land. And they were escalating. I saved the footage to a separate drive, made 3 backups, one on the cloud, one on a USB drive that went straight into my safe. One I emailed to my lawyer with a subject line that just said, "We've got her." But even as I sent it, I knew this wasn't over. People like Barbara don't go down quietly. They scream, They fight. They drag you through every inch of mud on the way down. She thought she could break me. She was about to learn what it really meant to push a farmer too far. It's one thing to know someone's out to get you. It's another thing to prove it. I'd always trusted my gut. Out here, on the farm, you have to. Weather shifts, animals act weird, fences bend when they shouldn't. It's instinct that keeps you alive. But instinct doesn't hold up in court. Evidence does. And that night, I got it. Barbara wasn't alone in the footage. That was the part that got me. She had brought 2 other people with her. I recognized them both, Don Wilson and Marie Paget, treasurer and secretary of the Rosewood Hills HOA. I'd seen them once during a public meeting I sat in on, back before all this went off the rails. They weren't just walking the perimeter. They were pointing at things, making notes, taking turns snapping photos with their phones. And then I saw it. Barbara pulled something out of her bag, a rolled-up document. She spread it out over the hood of my tractor and started pointing at it. One of them held a flashlight overhead while the other nodded along. I paused the video and zoomed in. Even grainy, I could make it out. The outline of a map, my farm, drawn inside their HOA boundary lines. Only one problem. They had never legally annexed it. That was it. The smoking gun. I'd spent weeks dealing with fines, threats, sabotage, and silence. But now I had them, dead to rights. The next morning, I drove straight to my lawyer's office. I didn't even call ahead. When I showed him the footage, his eyebrows shot up. He watched it 3 times, then leaned back his chair and said, "They just made your job a whole lot easier." Within 24 hours, we filed a civil harassment claim naming Barbara and the other 2 board members directly. Then we added a trespassing report, back with the footage and timestamps from my trail cams. But that wasn't all. My lawyer, his name's Kent, and he's one of those quiet types who only smiles when he's about to ruin someone's week, said we had enough to hit them with fraud too. Real fraud. The kind that makes city officials sweat. And HOA insurance policies crumble. Because see, by claiming my land on that map and using it to issue fines, threats, and a property seizure notice, they weren't just playing dirty. They were lying to the city, misrepresenting jurisdiction, and that made it real. Ken drafted a formal fraud complaint against the Rosewood Hills HOA and submitted it to the city's zoning and land records department. Then we sent cease and desist letters to every single member of the HOA board, not just Barbara. All of them. Certified mail. Signature required. We made it crystal clear. Every violation, every threat, every walk across my land, it all had to stop. But I wasn't done. I printed off copies of the trail cam footage, the fake HOA map, and the threat letter they'd sent about property acquisition under Clause 7B. I stapled it all into a tidy little packet, wrote up a cover letter summarizing the whole mess, and drove straight to the offices of the Greenwood County Gazette. Small town paper. Big mouthpiece. The editor, a guy named Rick, barely looked up when I walked in, until I dropped the packet on his desk. "What's this?" he asked. "Proof the Rosewood Hills HOA is illegally trying to seize private farmland." I said. "Mine." He raised an eyebrow. "You got evidence?" "Plenty. And a lawyer backing every word." He flipped through the documents while I stood there. After about 5 minutes, he looked up and said, "You're serious about going public?" "As serious as they're about stealing my land." Rick grinned like a man who just found gold in his backyard. "I'll have something in Friday's paper," he said. He did better than that. By Thursday afternoon, the story was already online with a headline in bold red font. Local HOA accused of illegally targeting farmer in land grab scheme. It spread faster than a field fire in a dry season. People in the community had always had mixed feelings about Rosewood Hills. Too many rules. Too many busybodies. But this was something else entirely. The comments section exploded. People were angry, real angry. And they weren't just mad at Barbara. They were mad at the whole board. By that evening, I had messages in my inbox from neighbors I barely knew. "You're doing the right thing. We're behind you. This has gone too far." I even got a voicemail from someone on the city council, thanking me for bringing the issue to light and asking for copies of the evidence. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe, but I knew this wasn't the end. Barbara wasn't the kind of woman to go quietly. She'd been in control too long. She believed she could do anything, redraw maps, twist rules, stomp over property lines like they were suggestions. But now, her name was in the paper. Her face was in the comments. And her little empire? It had just sprung its first leak. The only question left was how fast it would sink. The story dropped on a Wednesday morning, but by Thursday afternoon, it felt like the whole county had read it. Right there, in bold letters splashed across the front page and the online edition. HOA president illegally targets farm and land grab scheme. Underneath, it was a photo of me standing in front of my electric gate, arms crossed, my 2 German shepherds flanking me like sentinels. I hadn't even known the reporter took it. I'd given him a brief statement, nothing dramatic, just facts. But I guess the image said everything that needed saying. By lunchtime, the phones at City Hall were ringing nonstop. People were angry, and not just because of what happened to me. Turns out, Barbara had been pulling this kind of thing for a while, just never this big, never this public. One man came forward to say she fined him for excessive sunflowers and threatened to tow his trailer, even though it was parked on his own land. A widow down the road shared how Barbara told her she'd violate the peace code if she kept feeding stray cats on her porch. But no one had fought back. No one had cameras. No one had a lawyer. Until now. For the first time, the town was seeing Barbara for what she really was. Not a leader, not a volunteer, but control freak in a pantsuit who had finally gone too far. By that Friday morning, Barbara tried to save face. She called for a press conference, standing in front of the HOA office with 2 of her board members, her blazer perfectly ironed, and a tight smile stretched across her face like nothing was wrong. "We are deeply disappointed by the mischaracterization of our association's intentions," she said into microphones. "Mr. My Name has been hostile and uncooperative from the beginning. We simply tried to include him in our expanding community and uphold standards that benefit everyone." Hostile? I'd called, emailed, walked into her office like a civilized adult. I watched the live stream from my kitchen table, fists clenched around a mug of coffee. The arrogance on her face was almost impressive. She wasn't backing down. She was doubling down. At least, that's what she thought she could do. Because just 24 hours later, the real hammer dropped. Someone no one knows who, though I've got my theories, leaked emails from Barbara's personal account to a local watchdog blog. The subject lines were enough to make your stomach twist. Developer offer, Mackenzie lot potential. Can we expedite enforcement? Once he's out, they'll build before end of quarter. There were attachments, 2, screenshots, dates, maps, notes about how my land was prime resale for a planned extension of a subdivision. One message even said, "If we push hard enough, he'll fold. Worst case, legal bluff." That last line got passed around everywhere. It ended up on T-shirts, believe it or not. Legal bluff became kind of a running joke in town. But it wasn't funny to Barbara anymore. By the end of the weekend, she had gone from president of the HOA to the most hated woman in the county. The HOA board tried to spin it, said the emails were taken out of context, claimed Barbara didn't act alone. Didn't matter. By Monday morning, Barbara Langston resigned. It wasn't announced formally at first. People just noticed the nameplate was gone from the office door. Then the HOA website scrubbed her photo from the Meet the Board page. The official statement came hours later. Barbara Langston has voluntarily stepped down from her role as president of the Rosewood Hills Homeowners Association. We thank her for her service and will continue to uphold the values of transparency and community trust. What a joke. 48 hours after that, the entire HOA board was under city investigation. Why? Because the emails didn't just show intent. They showed misuse of funds, backdoor deals with a local developer, and evidence that Barbara had directed HOA resources toward harassing residents she didn't believe belonged. City Council issued a public request for any resident of Rosewood Hills who had been targeted or overcharged to come forward. And they did. A lot of them. The HOA's lawyer stopped responding to inquiries. By the end of that week, Rosewood Hills had gone from being the best planned community in the county to ground zero for one of the worst HOA scandals in state history. People were calling it the farm fight. My face, my farm, was on the news, local and regional. It was overwhelming at first. I don't like attention. I'm not one for the spotlight. But I kept my head down and stuck to the truth. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was just defending my home. But watching it all fall apart from the porch, watching Barbara eat her own lies on camera while her empire collapsed behind her, yeah, I won't lie. It felt good. It took months. Lawyers, paperwork, investigations, phone calls, follow-ups, stress headaches, and nights I barely slept. But I won. I won. The city officially nullified the fake annexation that Barbara and her board tried to push through. Turns out their documentation was sloppy, illegal in parts, and downright fraudulent in others. A city planner even admitted, off the record, that the HOA had bullied their way past standard review. Once my lawyer showed them the footage and the leaked emails, the city backed off faster than a scared coyote. Then came the lawsuit. Barbara thought resigning would protect her. She was wrong. The civil suit moved forward, naming her personally for trespassing, harassment, and attempted property fraud. She tried to deny everything, but the camera footage and email records buried her. The settlement wasn't massive. She wasn't some millionaire. But it was enough to sting, and enough to make sure she would never hold another leadership position in any HOA again. As for the rest of the board, they scattered like roaches when the lights came on. Don resigned. Marie moved out of town. The new interim board disbanded within a month, citing irreparable reputation damage. Rosewood Hills collapsed from the inside out. And my farm thrived. With the legal mess behind me and a bit of settlement money in my pocket, I put it to good use. I expanded the farm stand out front, added a covered produce rack, a freezer for homemade goat milk ice cream, and a cashless payment system. But the best thing I did? I installed a massive iron sign right above the front gate, painted black with big, bold white letters. Private land. Not HOA. Never will be. I didn't think much of it at first. I put it up for me. A statement. A reminder. A middle finger, if we're being honest. But it took on a life of its own. People started stopping by just to take pictures with it. I'm not kidding. Cars would pull up. Folks would hop out, pose in front of the sign like it was some kind of monument. They'd laugh, share their own HOA horror stories, sometimes even drop off cookies or jars of homemade jam as a thank you. One couple drove 2 counties over just to shake my hand. Said the story gave them the courage to finally fight back against their own HOA, who were trying to force them to chop down the oak tree in their backyard because it cast uneven shade. They call me a hero. I'm not. I'm just a guy who got pushed too far and decided not to back down. My dogs, Bear and Molly, they know the difference now. When a car pulls up slow and quiet, they're on alert. But when they see the smiling faces and the people waving with phone cameras in hand, they just stretch out under the shade and let the world pass by. These days, I sit on the porch most nights with a beer in one hand, Molly's head resting on my boot, and Bear curled up by the step. I look out over my land, the golden light spilling across the fields, the crickets chirping, the low rustle of wind moving to the corn rows, and I feel something I hadn't felt in a long time during that fight. Peace. Sometimes I glance across the valley toward Rosewood Hills. I can still see the rooftops glinting when the sun hits them just right. The place looks quiet now, hollow even, every now and then. I wonder what happened to Barbara, where she ended up, if she found another neighborhood to rule over, or she's somewhere licking her wounds, telling herself she was a victim in all this. I used to want revenge. I used to want to see her suffer the way she made me suffer. Nights of fear, stress, rage, helplessness. But now I don't care. She'll never step foot on my land again. And that's all the justice I need. This land, it isn't just dirt and fences and barns. It's memory, legacy. It's the sweat of my grandfather's brow, the calloused hands of my grandmother pulling weeds, the echo of laughter from my childhood summers. And now it's mine. Truly mine. No HOA. No more clipboard tyrants. No more surprise violations. Just freedom. And you better believe I'll fight just as hard if anyone ever tries again.